Wonderful. Kia ora koutou, ko Frida Wells toka ingoa. Welcome to the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee webinar titled Building for a Changing Environment and all about the updated Green Star rating tool. So it is our honour today to have wonderful Brad Crowley with us. Just quickly, I'm going to give a brief introduction about the Leadership Committee and then introduce Brad. So for those who may be less familiar, the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee is one of 6 such committees around Aotearoa, comprised of leaders from local and central government and iwi, brought together to work on issues that have been deemed sort of too big for any one entity or organisation to work on alone. So it's all about bringing collaboration for better outcomes for our future. And our vision is to positively shape our region's future to build a place where people can live, work, and thrive. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded. So a little bit about our speaker today. Brad is the manager of the Green Star rating tool, where he assists the Green Star team and identifies new opportunities to use the quiver of Green Star tools, which include things like design and as-built, performance, interior, communities. Probably said that wrong, Brad, sorry, to make buildings better. While getting his geography master's degree back in the late 1990s, Brad first heard about sustainability and green buildings, and ever since then he's been advocating for green buildings and sustainability, including starting his own business, creating and installing rainwater catchment systems in Portland, Oregon. Brad has a positive outlook on seeing what he and New Zealand Green Building Council can do to encourage healthier and more environmentally friendly buildings and communities in Aotearoa. So we're in good hands. I'll hand over to you, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frida. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and it's just been Frida and I were talking just a bit before the meeting today, and it's been really exciting in New Zealand. I think since around 2019 or so, we've seen a really uptick of interest in trying to make things more sustainable here in New Zealand. And I think if there's one take-home message, we need to change a lot of things of what we do here in New Zealand. But one of those, well, that includes how we get to work, how we get around, how we design our cities, which is going to be difficult, but needs to be done. I think kind of one of the easiest low-hanging fruit is sustainable buildings. It's been done all around the world. This is not rocket science. This is actually pretty well proven technology. So it's something, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's cheap, but I'm saying in the whole scheme of things, it's easier and cheaper than doing a lot of other things that we need to do. So it's one of the many things I think need to be working for. And I think obviously I'm a bit biased who pays my bills, but I'm pretty excited about what we do and what we can do here in New Zealand to address these issues. So let me open up my PowerPoint here. 1 second. I am going to spend a bit of time talking about just the benefits of green buildings, and assuming not everyone knows about Green Star, and then we'll dive into actually what's happening in the realm of Green Star buildings, which we just released recently. So yeah, as mentioned, I work with the New Zealand Green Building Council. Our vision is all homes and buildings in Aotearoa are green and sustainable, making healthier, happier New Zealanders. I think what's really important with this statement is it's not just green, but it's also sustainable. As hopefully you'll see when I talk more about this upcoming rating tool, we're expanding the scope of what we want to see our buildings doing, and not just being green for the planet, but being positive and good for people and the communities. So yeah, the title is Green Star Buildings NZ, the next step in evolution of sustainable buildings in Aotearoa. That's me, Senior Manager of Buildings and Communities. So I basically run the certification process for new builds.
Please make sure you got your mics turned off, everyone. Thank you.
Well, not at the end for the Q&A, but yeah. And also Green Star Communities, which if you want, I can talk more about, but that's actually looking at the precinct scale, talking about how do you actually design precincts or districts for sustainability. So that's a bit more what we're talking about, urban planning and trying to make people ride their bicycles and what have you. First off, what is New Zealand Green Building Council? So you all probably know us about our certifications and what we'll be talking about today. But we also do a fair amount of advocacy and working with government to try and push the building code, which has been a bit depressing lately about that, but there it is. We did get some wins, but we always need to be pushing harder to get a better building code in New Zealand. It's been proven that we've got basically the worst building code in the OECD, so that's not something to be proud of, and I think we need to be working on. And I think the fact that we have leaders of industry using things like Green Star and Homestar, which is over and above the building code, and able to do it successfully shows that, I think there's an appetite here in New Zealand to be changing just the bare minimum of our building code. We've been doing what we can to educate the industry about what is embodied carbon for buildings and making sure people thinking about that and learning their embodied carbon. And yeah, we definitely, I think for the upcoming ERP Climate Commission, we've given our suggestions to look more at buildings. Unfortunately, right now, I think there's basically just one sentence in the ERP saying we'll think about making buildings greener. So we'd like to see the government push for that a bit more. And then we do advocacy with our members. We, of course, do a lot of training, do webinars such as these, and industry events. We just had a Green Property Summit 2 weeks ago. We had a fantastic turnout of 300 people and 27 speakers. So it was really great to see the excitement and interest in green buildings just continue to grow. We collaborate. We actually have over 700 members in the industry who feel like they believe in us and want to become members with us, and we really do appreciate that. And then we do consultations for updates, which I'll talk about today. And then we've got our governance. And then, of course, like I said, we have our certification, which most of you know us for. So a pretty diverse, small, not-for-profit that I think punches above our weight. So that's just a snapshot of the members that we have in or NZGBC. I'm not sure if Greater Wellington Regional Council is a member. If it's not, we'd of course highly encourage you to be members. So happy to talk to you more later about that. So these are the quiver that Freda mentioned of our rating tools. We've got Green Star Design and As-Built for new buildings. Then we've got Green Star Interiors for fit-outs. And as discussed, we've got a brand new update of that called Green Star Buildings NZ, which I'll talk about shortly. And then for existing buildings, we've got Neighbors NZ for office, which basically looks at the energy efficiency of a building. And then thankfully, government has required all leases above, I think, 1,000 square meters. A building has to be Neighbors, I think, for here in New Zealand. And that is definitely, we've seen an uptick of interest because of that. And certainly a lot of buildings here in Wellington now have Neighbors rating because of that requirement, which we appreciate. Green Star Performance is our other rating tool for existing buildings, and that is a very much more of a holistic rating tool that looks at things like energy and water, but also waste, transportation, stormwater, and things such as that. So it's a more expansive, holistic rating tool for existing commercial buildings. We're definitely seeing an uptick of interest in that rating tool. And then for homes, we've got Homestar, which is for new builds. And then we have Home Fit for existing homes. And as mentioned, we've got Green Star Communities for precinct scale properties, development, excuse me. So we're really excited with that. We're seeing Peacock, which is a fantastic project that Hamilton City Council was involved with up there just southeast of Hamilton City. And that's, I think, going to have up to 3,000 people living there. It's really a fantastic project. They've just done story after story, including really doing a fantastic job working collaboratively with the local iwi, among many other things. So just really keep an eye on Peacock. I'm really proud that project is registered at Green Star Communities. And we just had MetLife Care in Clevedon Retirement Village registered at Green Star Communities. So it's a really cool tool. I won't spend any more time talking about that, but if you're interested, please do come talk to me. It's definitely looking more at the infrastructure and looking at sustainability, not just the green aspects, things such as encouraging community gardens, of course, getting people on bicycles, things such as that. So basically, honestly, it's urban planning 101. It's stuff you learned in your first year of urban planning. It's stuff that we all know we should be doing. So anyways, moving on. So why think about doing green buildings? Well, this is, of course, huge. We're talking about climate change. We're seeing more and more issues with this. I sadly don't think this is going to be a 100-year event right here. I don't wish that upon any of us, but I think it will be. I'm definitely looking at a home in Auckland, and I'm looking at the floodplains and making sure I'm not going to be risking myself. And I think a lot of other people would be doing that also. We're seeing a lot of projects registering a Green Star are going for the Climate Adaptation Plan credit, which looks at what are the risks for your site and how will you modify your building to deal with those climate risks in the future. So I tell young people, if you're looking at trying to find work, learn how to do climate adaptation plans or learn how to do life cycle assessments. These are things a lot of people are asking and wanting to do, and there's not a lot of people in New Zealand who know how to do these things. So, but we're definitely seeing a lot of projects in Green Star do that. With our last update at Green Star, you can't register a project until you commit to saying you'll at least do a climate checklist, which identifies the risk to your site. And actually, you have to give it to the developer, and the developer has to sign it saying they at least know the risk of the site. So I think that's the bare minimum I think we should be doing. I hopefully maybe that's something councils will start thinking about doing. But as we all know, if we can just not develop in a place we shouldn't develop in the first place, that's going to minimize risk in the future. So these are the reasons why we're seeing people come to us. Once again, it's about sustainability. So we encourage Green Star projects are going to usually have better ventilation rates. They're not going to be using toxic chemicals, have low VOC paints. It's just better not just for the planet, but it's for the people. Definitely need to reduce our waste to landfill. I'm just amazed how many places in New Zealand do not have the infrastructure in place to deal with C&D waste. We're trying to push that with Green Star by rewarding projects to do it, but they can only do it if they've got the infrastructure. So hopefully that's something councils and the central government are working harder to deal with. Buildings and infrastructure account for about 20% of our carbon emissions. About half of that is related to the carbon that goes into the building. So really, we're requiring projects now with Green Star that you've got to think about reducing your embodied carbon. And this is the type of stuff that you need to be getting your architects aware of right away before they even start putting pen to paper to think about that building. We're seeing more and more manufacturers providing lower carbon products. So it's really exciting that just in the past few years, we're seeing a lot of opportunities to lower the embodied carbon in buildings. So that's exciting. As already mentioned, we're seeing floods and droughts, local government climate change declarations, TCFDs, the top 200 asset holders in New Zealand have to do the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. That's been required by the XRB. What's really interesting is we're definitely seeing more and more companies having to do these TCFDs, and while they're doing it, they're identifying how much carbon is associated with some of their buildings. So, that's something that I think we're going to start seeing other companies that might not have thought about green buildings are coming to us now because of this. And this is another reason we're seeing a lot of new people coming to us is green finance. It's definitely huge. All throughout the world, people are becoming aware that they probably need to be making their buildings green because basically banks are asking for it. It's my understanding, this is just Brad talking, not NZGBC. In the next few years, I think banks are going to be asking about what is the embodied carbon of that building that I'm going to give a loan to, because that's going to go on, I believe it's going to go on their balance sheets. So I think we're going to start getting insurers and bankers asking these hard questions. And if you're not doing stuff like Green Star, you might not have that information to answer the question. That might not help you. So we're definitely talking about green and brown buildings. And I think if you got a green building, there's going to be a lot more carrots out there, including lower interest rates, which is already happening. See if I can move my screen. Continuing with that, I already said health and well-being, indoor air quality. I think everyone cares about this. I think during COVID, people started caring even more about how healthy their buildings are, and certainly green buildings reward buildings that make sure that it's a healthy place to be, including daylighting and acoustics. As already mentioned, finance, definitely get lower interest rates. Lower operating costs, that's kind of obvious. You should probably be using less water and less energy if you're in a Green Star building or home. Less maintenance, I think you're just going to get a better quality building, honestly. Certifying sustainable buildings can support alignment with companies' wider ESG goals. We're seeing, there was a study recently released by JLL that did a study that's showing if you got a Green Star building, you're going to have a much lower occupancy. You're going to basically have many more people in your building, and you're going to get higher rates for your rents. And that's partly because a lot of the international companies are making sure that where they're putting the people align with their goals to make sure they're in a green building. So we're certainly seeing that happening more and more. This is a great example of why you should do a green building. I've seen a slide showing that like 90% of the costs of a company is related to the employee salaries. And if you can make them be healthier and happier, that's probably going to increase productivity, and that's going to be a huge payback for you. This is a fantastic building on top of all this stuff, it's just a beautiful building. It's kind of become a bit of a community space where a lot of meetings happen on the ground floor. And it's just really a beautiful space. And it took a really tired and old warehouse building and refurbished it and made it into a really fantastic space. So I highly encourage you to check it out if you're in Auckland. Once again, all these benefits of green buildings, the obvious ones being lower greenhouse gas emissions and lower energy usage and water usage. And this is the one that goes back to having a healthy building. What are the benefits of that? It's shown that I know that in America, Walmart has daylighting, and it's not because they're green, it's because they actually have increased sales by having daylighting in their stores. Higher test scores, people aren't staying in hospitals as long with green hospitals. So all these benefits that if you just have a healthy space for people, no surprise, people are going to be better overall. So once again, it's not just about the planet, it's about the people. In New Zealand, we've got many organizations that have committed to using Green Star, and they're in the black. They're not going the red. These are companies that know what they're doing, and they've determined it makes sense for them to do Green Star. And by them doing that, we've seen, at least in the Auckland area, if you're going to have an office building, it's just going to be Green Star, and same for now for industrial buildings, because Auckland Airport requires you to do Green Star if you're going to do any buildings out by the airport. So between them and Goodman and Argosy, basically, I'm hearing that if you're going to be building a new warehouse building in Auckland, it will be Green Star because otherwise tenants aren't interested. We recently released this document, Guidance on Green Building Ratings for Sustainable Finance. It helps developers and bankers understand what we think makes sense to be what you should be asking of the buildings to actually give lower interest rates. So that's out on the street. I'm beginning to hear some really interesting stuff from developers on what they're being asked for by their assurers. And so I think this document will help them with that. So ANZ has created this amazing document. I think it's like a 10-page document talking about why you should be doing green property. Highly recommend you check it out. All the big banks are working with us, and they're basically giving some type of incentive for doing either Green Star or Home Star. So lots of different ways people are coming to us. I'm very Machiavellian. I don't know why I don't care why you want to do Green Star. As long as you're doing Green Star, that's cool by me. So, but yeah, I think it's green. It makes sense. So I'll jump in real quick about what's going on with us and the new rating tool the rating tool for new builds. So back in 2021, we had Design As Built version 1.1 launched, and that took some updates and what we heard from the industry and just made it better for the industry. And then we started doing consultation for Green Star buildings. In October 2022, we had 2 rounds of consultation with industry. We worked with expert reference panels, Green Star Advisory Committee, a lot of technical experts in New Zealand to make sure that this rating tool that came from Australia, from the Green Building Council of Australia, was fit for purpose for the New Zealand marketplace. So we've heard everyone what they had to say. We had to modify a few things to make sure it worked for the New Zealand marketplace, including the C&D waste requirement. In Australia, they said a minimum expectation that every project had to do 70% waste diversion from C&D. We sadly learned that in New Zealand, except for Auckland, it's almost impossible to get 70% waste diversion. So we've lowered that down to 40%. We hope in the future to be able to raise that up, but we definitely know even Wellington has a hard time getting, I think, to 60%, and then you start talking about Dunedin, Invercargill, and even Christchurch, and it's pretty difficult to get beyond 40% sometimes. So it's things like that we listen to the New Zealand marketplace. We did listen, and we still went forward with the air tightness testing. We are requiring all Green Star buildings going forward as of next year that they have to do air tightness testing. They don't have to fulfill any requirements, so it could be as cheese grater and just letting air blow right through it, but they got to at least try and design leakages out, and they actually have to do an air testing. We learned from our compatriots across the ditch at GBCA that when they did that, they actually started helping grow the industry, and we're already seeing that happen. So we were aware of at least 1 or 2 companies now that can do commercial air tightness testing. So be aware that that's coming, and we would hope someday that that's actually in the building code. It's pretty common in America and Europe. It just makes sense to make sure your buildings aren't leaky, right? So anyways, a bit of a tangent. So that's been the past 2 years. So we just launched Green Star Buildings about 2 weeks ago. So now people can either register to our existing rating tool of Design and As-Built 1.1 or to Green Star Buildings NZ. And then in June 2025, Design and As-Built is retired, and then Green Star Buildings becomes the only rating tool people can use. So we're letting people have about a year to use either one. We've already got one great project that has said that they will use Green Star Buildings, which is the Samsun project and 42 Ponsonby in Auckland, which is really exciting. And we're hearing rumbling from a few other developers that they're very interested in using this tool. So that's really exciting. And I think you'll see it's really a great evolution of the tool and something to be excited for. So way back in 2018, the Green Building Council of Australia sat down and said, we need to do an update. Let's see what's happening out there in the world. And I've seen a presentation from Jorge Chapa, who was really intimately involved with this back in 2018, and he made a really great point that some of this stuff wasn't even around back then, or if it was around, it was just a glimmer in someone's brain, or it was, only a few people knew of it. So, but they kind of found these things and determined that this is probably something we'll be seeing in the future, and they turned out to be pretty correct. TCFDs are not being required in New Zealand. I think we're the first country to do it, but now Australia is requiring it, as are several other countries. I'm hearing more and more interest in TNFDs, as Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. The UN Sustainable Development Goals were just being released in 2018. We certainly hear a lot of corporates are making sure that what they're doing aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals, and on and on. GRESB is really popular in Australia. We don't hear it happening as much in New Zealand. It's the Green Real Estate Sustainability Board, I think it is. It's basically, if you've got a portfolio of buildings and you want to have someone invest with you, usually internationally, it's a way to get rated to see how sustainable are your buildings. And no surprise, if the buildings are rated a Green Star or Home Star, you basically, it helps you. So that's happening a lot in Australia. We're beginning to see that start happening here in New Zealand. So we might see more and more people asking about that. And then for our rating tool, we recently made sure that all the things we're doing in the realm of carbon, including embodied and operational carbon, actually aligns with the science-based targets, which was pretty complex and a lot of head scratching, but we got there in the end. So, and I think more and more people are going to be doing that. So found out from Jorge when he spoke to us recently that they looked at the Global Risk Report back in 2018 and tried to see what risk were happening or people were caring about year to year, and then or the 10-year risk, and they kind of try to use that as a gauge to look at what they should be looking at from the future. So this was back then in 2018, short-term and then longer-term risk. But as you can see, climate action, resource and circularity, and health and well-being kind of became the reoccurring themes of something that they thought was items they need to care about in the future for the rating tool. So they incorporated that into an update to the rating tool. So we've got climate action, which looks at net zero emissions, climate resilience and nature, resources and circularity with circular economy, embodied materials and water cycle, health and well-being, people and equity, and community resilience. So you'll see as I talk later that there's a lot of new tools that address some of these high-level issues. So what does Green Star Buildings do to transform the built environment? They do it in 5 ways: reducing the impact of climate change, of course. That's something that Green Star has always done, but it definitely has a much more laser-focused pathway to make sure that by 2030, all Green Star buildings are on a net zero ready pathway. And enhancing our health and quality of life, restoring and protecting our planet's biodiversity and ecosystems, driving resilient outcomes for buildings, fit outs, and communities, and contributing to market transformation and a sustainable economy. So these are the new categories in Green Star buildings, and this image shows how they kind of interweave with the different credits in different categories. So and that's basically something that we're really excited and proud of, and I'll talk to you more about these credits shortly. But yeah, it's showing the importance of all these different categories and why we care about them. And once again, I'd say of the 8, probably 4 were around in the existing rating tool, and another 4 are brand new to this new rating tool. And so once again, we've made Green Star buildings much easier. So if your organization has to fulfill certain sustainable development goals, each credit in this new manual says, okay, this credit covers 3, 11, and 16, for example. So it really helps organizations figure out if which credits they should pursue if different sustainable development goals are a priority to them. It also helps projects to get climate bonds and helps you with TCFDs. These are some amazing documents that GBCA has been involved with in the realm of sustainable finance. I'm still a bit new in this area and I'm delving into it slowly, but it's really becoming very important that developers understand this because it's what they're being asked of more and more. And this is the U8 taxonomy is something that's been developed in the EU, and GBCA has made sure that what they've done with Green Star Buildings actually aligns with these requirements. So if you have an investor from Europe and they start asking these questions, and if you've got Green Star Buildings, you can probably confidently say that you're going to address these issues for their financing. Same with climate bonds in Australia. We've not verified this in New Zealand, but definitely if you're going to do a 6 or 5-star Green Star Buildings rating, it basically full stop, you can get climate bonds, and you'll not have to be vetted by one of the big four for that. It's just automatically check box, you get it, which is fantastic. And these are some great documents if you're interested. Our document is a very nice 10-page document. The one on the left, the Australian one, is 120 pages. I've just began reading it. I'm not an economist, so we'll see how this goes. But I really do think it's something we all need to be understanding more and more. And then the one on the right is the international guide. So basically, they worked with the U.S. Green Building Council that does LEED, BREE, does BREEAM. I believe the French Green Building Council and the Green Building Council of Australia and the Singaporean Green Building Council created an international document. So if you're dealing with an investor overseas and they know this document, they know that Green Star should fulfill their requirements, which is fantastic. So for Green Star Buildings, as mentioned, these are the new categories, which I'll delve into in a moment. So this real quick is the Responsible Products Framework. In the past, in our existing rating tool, you can get maybe about 10 points out of 100 if you're doing some type of sustainable or green product in your building. Now, under Green Star Buildings, it's much more expansive. I think it's up to 20 points. And it definitely doesn't just look at it, is it a green product? That'd be the old right here, positive. That would be what we used to use as a eco-label or what have you. Now it's definitely it's expanding it, saying, are you transparent? Is it healthy for both the workers making the product and the person installing the product and being in the space? Is it circular, i.e. cradle to cradle certification or what have you? So it's really expanding what is a responsible product in a building, and which I think is really exciting, but it's going to require us to actually probably upskill the industry a bit more because on the front of it's pretty easy, but behind it is a bit more complex. So trying to help manufacturers navigate this is something we'll be doing. Thankfully, EcoChoice Aotearoa, which used to be EcoChoice New Zealand, they've been involved with the process and they've making sure that their eco labels have been blessed and approved by GBCA, which allows them to be used with us here in New Zealand for Green Star projects. And of course, it allows them to be used over in Australia also. So Green Star in the past, for 4-star was 45 points, 5-star was 60 points, 6-star was 75 points. It's a bit different now because under Green Star Buildings, we've got some minimum expectations that every green building has to do. There's a total of 16 minimum expectations, so that's why this is kind of skewed down a little bit. So we've got legal compliance, which is the building code, which, as mentioned, it's really not that impressive. In New Zealand, it has a ways to go. I guess that's a good way of looking at it. Then good practice is meeting the minimum expectations that I'll talk about. And then 4 stars, 15 points, 5 stars, 35 points, and 6 stars, 70 points. What we're seeing right now is we're actually beginning to see projects that have been targeting 5-star, and with not too much additional work, they're able to move it up to 6-star. That lets us know that it's probably time to reset our rating tool because it's probably getting a little bit too easy to get a 6-star rating in Green Star. With the new rating, we probably will not be seeing 6-star that often. It really will be world leadership, and you won't see it too often. We've got to reset the industry to realize that 4-star is actually really something to be proud of. I really get frustrated when I'm talking to developers, and they say if they can't get 5-star, they're not going to bother even doing it, which is really sad because 4-star is still well and truly above the building code and something we should celebrate. Of course, always want people to be pushing it to 5 to 6-star. That's something great, but 4-star should be something we're proud of and happy with. So, and you'll see that with the Sustainable Finance Guide. Right now, for the Sustainable Finance Guide, for our existing rating tool, you need to get 5-star, but for the new one, Green Star Buildings, you just need to get 4-star. So it's just letting the industry reset what is 4-star and to be proud of 4-star. So as mentioned with Green Star Buildings, you have to first meet the minimum expectations. These are credits that most people would just kind of assume would be in a Green Star building, but it's not required. But honestly, these are credits that most projects would pursue, such as end-of-trip facilities, energy efficiency, lower embodied carbon, things like that. Lower, actually reducing your C&D waste. So these are all things that are probably pretty common in a Green Star project already, but now every project has to do it. So in the future, when you go in a Green Star building, you'll go, oh, I would have expected this. This is something that a Green Star building just usually has. And then you can start going on the net zero ready pathway to try and reduce your carbon in your building. And then you can go from other credits. So that's kind of the high level, how people are going to be navigating Green Star buildings in the future. And sorry for the small font because it's a lot of them, but there's 16 minimum expectations that every project is going to have to do under Green Star buildings. A few of them already being required in the existing versions, such as I already mentioned that climate change resilience checklist to make sure that you've identified risk with the project. Also, we're already requiring people to minimize their upfront carbon and their energy use, but now you have to actually make sure you reduce your water use, and you have end-of-trip facilities. And this one we shouldn't even be mentioning it, but basically inclusive construction practices, so making sure you have provisions for gender-appropriate facilities and personal protective equipment, and also making sure that bullying is not happening on the work site and things such as that. So the one that people need to know the most about, the one that's, like I already mentioned, is going to be moving the industry a bit, is actually having airtightness testing in every building. So we've already done a 3-part webinar to educate the industry on what is airtightness testing and what you need to do. So we're excited that we've done that, and we've already seen some results of that by a few companies popping up that are going to be providing this service. So in the future, hopefully we'll be finding our buildings are a little bit less leaky, which would be a good thing. So yeah, as I mentioned, the Green Star Buildings includes a net zero pathway, a clear set of targets aligned with IPCC recommendations, building that's fossil fuel free, powered by renewables, highly efficient, built with lower carbon materials, and offset with nature. And as mentioned, we worked with our technical experts to make sure that it stays in line with the science-based targets, which is when we did it, we realized, wow, we're going to really have to reduce our operational efficient, or make more energy efficient and lower the embodied carbon much more than we thought we would have to by 2030. But it's something that we're making the industry aware of. So as mentioned, this is what the net zero ready pathway means. If you're going to be 6-star right now, basically the entire building has to be fossil fuel free. When we first started talking about this, we got a huge amount of pushback, but the new Auckland Outlet Center that's being opened up in the near future has been already certified to Green Star design rating 5-star. That one has several restaurants and it's all fossil fuel free. So this is totally doable. Of course, there's caveats. Yes, if you got an emergency generator that can be powered by diesel, but other things that we're telling you have to get any connections, any gas connections can't go to the building in the future. Right now, that's just for 6-star, but over time, that's going to go to 5 and then to 4-star. So happy to talk more about that. And yeah, when you mentioned this, and this just gets in more detail as to right now, if you want to be 6-star, you've got to do these things. And over time, when you're 5-star, by 2026, you have to do this. And then by 2028, 4-star has to do these different requirements. So it's just showing that we're educating the industry and saying over time, every Green Star building is going to have to address these things, but we're going to, upskill the industry to make sure that they're aware of it and working towards it, designing for it in the future. So this is the responsible category, and I'm highlighting the 2 credits that have some major changes to it. But as already mentioned, the responsible structure, responsible envelope, responsible systems, and responsible finishes has been modified in how we award responsible products. So I'll mention that a little bit more in a moment. So verification handover, as I mentioned, now every building has to be designed to have basically as airtight as possible. And you're going to make sure that the project is going to be commissioned and tuned, which really every project should be doing anyways. And all this information should be handed over to the building user as a minimum expectation. And then if they want to get a credit, they can do more, such as soft landings. So that's the verification handover minimum expectation. And this is a slide from Sean Maxwell from 8 Atma in Australia, but showing basically this is what we're expecting products to do in the realm of airtightness testing. So they have to actually do a red line test and design and look, hey, is there penetration? Let's make sure that penetration doesn't allow air leakage in, and then to keep staying on top of it pre-construction and during construction, making sure that all the builders know they shouldn't be penetrating with, nails or screws or what have you into the vapor barrier, and then actually doing the airtightness testing. So once again, we've got a 3-part webinar we did back, I think in April, which I highly encourage people who want to learn more about airtightness testing to check out on our website. And this is being done, as mentioned, is being done all around the world. This is doable, and it's definitely happened. It's been upskilled and happening pretty commonly now in Australia. Excuse me. So this is the Building 201 project in Auckland, which took a really ugly, brutalist building that I heard stories from people that when they were students, they just avoided that building because it was a rat's maze and just really not a very friendly place. And they've repurposed it, turned this fantastic 6-star Green Star building. And by repurposing the building, it lowered the carbon, but also it was able to do it more quickly, finish the project quicker, and actually have a really beautiful project everyone's proud of. I went to the opening ceremony, and a woman did a poem which had Green Star in it, which I wish I had recorded it because it made my heart shine. It was really cool to hear her do that. So, but yeah, this is showing that they did an airtightness test on the building. So it is doable. It does happen here in New Zealand. It's possible. So responsible procurement, we designed this credit. We took the version from Australia and we modified it for the New Zealand market with the hope of the draft modern day slavery legislation, which sadly has been shelved, it seems, which from what I'm hearing, that's really not a good thing for New Zealand, because it sounds like more and more places throughout the world are expecting, if you're going to be supplying them a product, they're expecting you to address modern day slavery. So I think a lot of manufacturers are going to have to look at this anyways, whether it's required by law or not. So this credit tries to encourage contractors to look at the procurement pipeline and identify risk and opportunities and minimize the risk for what they're procuring. So that's a new credit in this tool, and we worked with Edge Environmental on that one. As mentioned, the responsible products framework, it's not just looking at the positive, it's looking at circularity and healthy and responsible. So responsible is transparency. So that's would include an environmental products declaration, which is a standardized way of looking at information and showing 8 different parameters of your product from cradle to gate, as they call it. So A1 to A3. And that's actually making sure that it's just a standardized way of getting information and showing anyone purchasing a product what your product is doing. So we're requiring that if we're doing embodied carbon calculation, we often want to see an EPD. So we're seeing more and more manufacturers using environmental product declarations going forward. We worked with waste management and the industry to create an operational waste calculator. I was a bit surprised. There's one for residential. I think Auckland Council created a very nice calculator for residential, but we were not aware of one for commercial. So we've created this calculator to show if you're different type of building topologies, different square meterage of a building, how much waste, how much recycling are you going to generate per week. And then we go on to figure out how much space do you need to have set aside so you can actually put the recycling in the proper bins and the proper frequency for pickup. So that's going to be available on our website shortly, including also best practices. I've been a bit surprised to find out that the building code basically only has, I think, 2 pages related to waste and recycling, which is, in what I've read, is a bit simplistic. It really kind of makes sure that there's no rats and it deals with a little bit of fire, safety, but that's about all it does. So we've created a best practices guide, which we hopefully will be encouraging the industry to use going forward. So watch the space on that one. So this is a healthy category. Most of these have already existing. Clean air is making sure that projects have ensure that they've spec'd out low VOC products going forward, which is something we want to be saying and doing. And the thermal comfort, an amenity that's actually encouraging those prayer rooms or spaces for nursing mothers. So hopefully more and more buildings are doing that. Yeah, so I think it's a great credit. Hopefully you'll see more projects going for that. And then connection to nature. So that's just looking at biophilic design. So how do you actually make a building so people feel like they're relating with nature? So what we have done with this is we've actually taken some things from the International Living Future Institute, which makes the Living Building Challenge, and they got a biophilic design protocol, and we're encouraging projects to use that. So we're working very closely with the Living Building Challenge people, practitioners here in New Zealand, and they are going to be providing courses to help projects hopefully pursue this credit more in the future. Yeah, and these are the benefits of biophilic nature design evidence. This is from Tricia Love, who we work with on Green Star projects, but she's also a Living Building Challenge rock star out there. So, yeah, just showing, as we've said already, if you make a space that's both healthy, but also people are inspired by nature, you're going to have all these benefits from that design. Yeah, natural shapes and forms, natural patterns, light and space, place-based relationships, evolved human-nature relationships. So we hope to see more projects go in this pathway and making the spaces even more enjoyable for the people that are in them. The resilient category. In the past, we basically had the adaptation and resilience credit, and that looked at making sure your building was either low damage design, so if in an earthquake, it could be repaired relatively easily, and the climate adaptation plan and checklist, as I mentioned. So we basically took the climate change resilience credit from the old tool and lifted and shifted and moved it over to this one. There's also the operations resilience, which says you have to identify the risk of your building, and if it's earthquake, so be it. But if it's not earthquake, what else might it be, and how do you make sure that you're dealing with the risk? And then we have the community resilience and heat resilience. So the community resilience is actually saying, my understanding of this one is how can you work with the local community and identify the shocks and stresses that impact the building's ability to serve the community, especially in the event of an emergency. So it's my understanding in the event of a flood or what have you, hopefully people might know if the building has pursued this credit, they'll know that library or what have you has been designed to be resilient and to help the community in the event of a crisis. So I think that's something we all should be trying to make our buildings do, but this credit rewards projects that do that. And this is just an example of what a community needs analysis might look like. So what might the impacts be? Is it likely, unlikely, major, minor, and what have you? So we've done a webinar based on a lot of these categories already, and we've got a few more in the future I can talk about. So if anyone's interested in this, I highly encourage you to check that webinar out and learn more about it. Heat resilience, when we brought the rating tool over back in 2019, the one that we're using right now, we decided in New Zealand that, urban heat island effect, that's not an issue. We don't need to worry about that here in New Zealand. Well, I think sadly that is something we need to worry about in New Zealand. So we brought this credit back into the system. Short answer is it's going to encourage projects to either have eco roofs, green roofs, or basically reflective roofs. Hopefully we'll stop seeing buildings, especially residences, using the black metal roof. That's not going to help the urban heat island effect. So this is just a real nice image of what urban heat island effect is, saying that basically outside in the rural area, it's not going to be hot, but the minute you start getting into the city, there'll be an increase in temperature and start having higher risk of people having heat stroke and what have you. And of course, there's numerous benefits. We should be planting more trees in our cities, but also making our buildings less, more reflective and not absorbing the heat. Then we have the positive category, which honestly, none of this is really that new. It's some updates. And like I said, we looked at the science-based targets to make sure it's up to date. But basically, it's just a step up from the existing rating tool. So I'm not going to talk about that. I can talk about more if you have any questions. Now we have the places category, which really, except for movement in place, which is something we had in the past, which rewarded projects that if they had mass transit or end of trip facilities or EV charging. So that's still kind of the same. There's some minor changes, but it hasn't changed too much. But the other three credits are brand new in the rating tool. And so we're expecting to see more interaction, more people using urban planners and landscape architects for Green Star projects if they go for these credits, which I think is exciting. So this is an enjoyable places credit. The building provides places that are enjoyable and inclusive, so memorable, beautiful, vibrant, and communal and public spaces. So we're really hoping to see that buildings will try to even more so interact with its local community. So so hopefully we'll have buildings that have spaces outside, and or they'll have the ground floor being more inclusive, so retail or what have you, to let people come in and create community, which I think we need to be seeing more of in the urban environment. Contribution in place. The building's design makes a positive contribution to the quality of the built environment. Well-functioning urban environments enhances the public realm. And then independent reviews that's right, this one encourages you or rewards you for doing independent reviews in the development of the design. So make sure you're in using local architects and designers and the community to help design the building. And then culture, heritage, and identity. The building's design reflects and celebrates the local demographics and identities, history, place, and any hidden or minority entities. And the outcome is arrived through meaningful engagement in community groups. So I think and hope we're going to see much more stakeholder engagement going forward with Green Star projects. You'll see another credit that we'll talk about in a moment that does that also, which is the people category. So as mentioned, we have the inclusive construction practices, which once again, during the building's construction, the head contractor provides inclusive facilities and protective equipment. So we're going to have PPE for all sizes of people, all types of people, and you're going to have toilets for everybody, as a simple example. And then the head contractor also installs policies on site to increase awareness and reduces incidences of discrimination, racism, and bullying. And then on top of that, if they actually want to have more in-depth training to actually talk about mental health, physical mental health, and actually talking about sustainability. So I realize that this is probably not ideal, but it's just showing an example of inclusive construction practices. But just make sure that we're thinking about everyone on site and they're being taken care of. This project I was intimately involved with, we created a Maori technical working group. This manual came over from Australia. They had inclusive, indigenous inclusion credit. That was, of course, specific to Australia. And so we actually worked with the Maori Technical Working Group to create this credit. And I'm really excited about this. I'm already hearing projects that are interested in using this already with our existing rating tool. But we're basically saying we want projects to be, the developer to be involving the local iwi or hapu very early on in the design process and have them identify at least 10 points in Green Star that they would like the project to pursue in their specific way. So I think this is really exciting. And then you can get another point if you actually will continue to have an enduring relationship with the local hapu or iwi beyond the project scope and time frame. So rewarding developers and projects that actually not just do this once off, but have an enduring relationship with the local hapu and iwi. And then we have procurement workforce inclusion, so just making sure that the construction facilitates workforce participation and economic development of disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. So we're aware that Auckland Council has some type of protocol for this, which we've referenced in this. Not sure if Greater Wellington Regional Council has something similar. I'm assuming you do. But, I think these are things that if you're going to be building buildings for Greater Wellington Regional Council, you probably would be asking for a lot of these credits, including this one. So if you do, hopefully you will do a Green Star building in the future. This is a credit. Hopefully you'll be encouraging the design into the project. And also design for inclusion. I'm still a bit surprised at how much this isn't really baked into the building code like it is in America and even Australia. So we've had to actually modify this credit to simplify it a bit because it sounds like New Zealand, sadly, is not as well along as it could be in this realm. So we are hoping to see this happen more. We're actually making a building for all the people in the community. We had a presentation done by B Lab, which is a great organization, and they basically said at least 25% of people are in some way, shape, or form are disabled. That would include someone who's got a broken leg that has to use crutches or wheelchair, even temporarily, or people getting older. So basically, if you're actively designing for the disabled and access community, then you're designing for absolutely everyone. So it just makes sense to be thinking about these people, and it could be you for at least a period of time. So it's really something we want to be seeing happening more in Green Star buildings. This is an example of a project that was in Australia. So they've got like meditation spaces. So if people are a bit neurodivergent, they can go into safe, quiet rooms this is at a university. And so they can kind of just relax and recharge before going back into the classroom. So this is the type of stuff you want to see more of. And then the nature category is pretty new. 4 out of the 5 credits are new credits. So this is a project that was done in Australia. It had podiums and actually, I'm sorry, no, this is an industrial facility. So you can see it had a lot of landscaping. So they did a really great job of getting indigenous species on site, trying to actually encourage nesting of endangered species and what have you. So this is one of the credits, ecological value is conserved and protected. So of course, as with all Green Star buildings, we don't want you to be building a Green Star building on a protected high ecological value site. Also minimizing the light pollution and making sure you're doing ongoing monitoring, reporting, and management of sensitive ecosystems. And then on top of that, how have you conserved the soil and indigenous vegetation on site, and then protecting highly diverse value is retained. And then biodiversity, you've looked at appropriate landscape area and identified the diversity of species and prioritized the use of climate resilient indigenous plants. So this is just making sure you're landscaping for the local biology and biodiversity of the site. So we definitely have already kind of picking up some of the industrial buildings which have a lot of landscaping or might be interested in this credit, which we're excited about. And also if any developers looking at the task force for nature-related financial disclosure, they'll probably be looking at this credit also. And then nature connectivity, how do we make sure that we're providing corridors for nature so they can easily move and survive? And these are just some example of landscaping spaces in between buildings to achieve these credits. And then we have nature stewardship. So biodiversity is restored beyond the building site. So ideally, we want you to be taking care of all this on site. But if you're unable to, then you've identified some site away from the building that you've got a covenant to make sure it will not ever be developed and you can actually restore nature to where it was before development occurred. So that's it. So that's what we do. And I'm really excited about this rating tool. I'm excited there's already projects that are showing interest in it, and I think it's what we all want to see our buildings do in the future. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brad. That was a lot of information, but really you shared it really clearly. And quite a few cool questions have flown into the Q&A. So I'm a bit of a fan of people engaging. If you wanted to ask your question for yourself, please go ahead. I'm going to go chronologically. Jeffy Palamatin, your question was in there first. Did you want to have a little chat with Brad and ask that question?
Hey, Brad, thanks. Really cool presentation. We're keen. I mean, it's one of the things about the products. I mean, how do we know which ones follow the responsible products framework? Because it's one of the things you struggle with. You're like, oh, it's really cool. It's nice you're following it, but you just don't know where to begin with. Is there a label or is there guidance or something like that?
Great question, Jeffy. It's something that my team is inundated with questions all the time, as you might not be surprised. We at NZGBC and with Green Star, we don't certify. We certify buildings, of course. We do not certify products because we're kept pretty busy with just buildings. So what we rely upon is eco-labels that have been approved by GBCA. So that's something like Cradle to Cradle, which really encourages circularity. Declare, which is saying we've got all these list of chemicals we think are not good for people on the planet, and we make sure that these nasty chemicals are not in the products. We've got EPDs and we've got eco-labels. So there are many other things. There's like best practice PVC. There's sustainable steel. So there's a lot of different ways, approaches to this. And the flippant answer is to send you over to the GBCA's website, and you can kind of play with what the different certification schemes are. But what we used to do for a little while, we said, oh, well, that's a European eco-label. It must be good. Well, that's not really good enough, right? So there's a very in-depth process that GBCA thankfully is doing, and we're not doing it, that they're actually vetting these different eco-labels and saying, okay, this fulfills this of the 5 things I mentioned. They do this, this, this. Okay, this one does that. Okay, if you do the 2 together, you can't double count it, but this one covered, the responsible, and this one covers the healthy. And that then, because you put the 2 together, it gives a responsible products value of 12, for example. So, yeah, we're definitely going to be doing, as you might not be surprised, we're going to be doing a webinar on that. We are doing a responsible category webinar on the 19th of September, which is going to just kind of high-level talk about all the responsible credits, including the responsible products framework. So if you're at all interested, I highly encourage you to attend that. And then we'll do a more detailed webinar probably in November, getting much more in the weeds on this. We will probably, hopefully sooner rather than later, have like a 5 or 10 minute long video to explain it to people, because it's something we're going to get a lot of questions about. Did that answer the question, Jeffy, or do you have any others to add to that?
Kind of makes sense. I'll probably start up GPCA start, and then we'll take it from there. It just becomes a bit complex in the beginning because you don't know which one makes sense. And I mean, if you're importing something like steel from a country that uses coal mostly for city as opposed to production in New Zealand, there's different aspects. It's hard to always quantify all of that.
Absolutely. Understood. And as a manufacturer, it's understanding which one makes sense for you and what's the, what you're doing something green, but how can you verify it with X, Y, Z, eco-label, what have you. So yeah, but we're thankfully working with a lot of the manufacturers and suppliers in New Zealand to make them aware of this, and we're working with them.
Thanks, Brad. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Jeffy.
I'm going to break my own rule. Jeffy had another quick question, which I thought was a really good one. Do you have estimates of how much % extra you'll need on CapEx to get 4-star versus 5-star versus 6-star ratings?
We don't yet. Thankfully, we've got one project that's looking at taking an existing project that's done design as built 1.1, and they're going to look at what is the uplift to get to Green Star Buildings 5-star. So we don't have the answer yet. We hope to have that. I don't know how long it's going to take. We're having the first meeting, I think, this week. So watch the space. I know that it doesn't answer the question. I'll still say it anyways, is that Australia, it took them 6 years with their old rating tool to get to 400 registrations. With design as built, it took them, I think it was like 4 years. For Green Star Buildings, it took them 2 years to get to 400 registrations. So initially, the industry was scared of the tool because it is a step up. I'm not going to lie, but once they kind of got their brains around it, they actually realized that it is achievable and it's something they wanted to do. So there's going to be growing pain. There always is when we change, but we need to change. Like I said, it's becoming, I'm not going to say it's easy, but we are seeing a lot of projects going to 6-star when they thought they were just going to go for 5-star. So it's suggesting we always need to be pushing the industry, right? We don't want to scare them away, but we also don't want to kind of just keep it flatline. And I mean, way back when, I think version 3 rewarded projects that had LED lighting. Well, that's just bog standard now, right? So we've got to keep evolving the tool. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just pitch into that? I mean, part of it is because it just makes the conversation so much easier when you start off that design conversation. My background started off with Green Building Council in South Africa, and they had estimates for every project where it was, we knew that if it's a 4-star, it's about 4% capex, and going to 6-star is about 8% capex. And it's kind of like a broad range that made it easier. And when you kind of start pitching the project, you're like, listen, it might be about 10% to get the 6-star. It is just easy to get it going, and leadership kind of just jumped on the boat because you kind of preempted what that cost would be. But yeah, that's all. I think it'll be really cool to get those quantities.
To continue to answer that, we've got a financial transparency innovation challenge in Design as Built right now, and sadly, we're finally beginning to have projects do it because they were scared of sharing the information, and now thankfully that's happening. This week I'm meeting with some people to actually help make this even easier. So actually QS can just dump their information in there. We can kind of just make it really a lot more streamlined, and hopefully we'll get more data because right now we just don't have the data even for our existing rating tool. We hear rumbling. Well, we definitely hear in Australia it's about 2 to 5% cost uplift. I think New Zealand might be a little bit more, but I don't think it's much more. But we don't have any firm numbers to answer that question right now.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
The interesting part of that is then the argument around the savings on the other side, isn't it? Really powerful information.
It's many things, like I said in the presentation. It's not just the energy and water, which takes a bit of a long time to pay back. It's actually the efficiency of your workers, people being healthier. It's also the higher rents you can get if it's Green Star. It's a lot of different things that add up to make it really attractive, I think.
Absolutely. Asma Rashidi.
Kia ora. Hi. Thanks, Frida. Thanks, Brad, for the presentation. My question is regarding construction and demolition waste management in Green Star. I remember last year, I think it was the same kind of webinar. I heard the same statistic and issue about the construction waste. And I just wanted to know that what are the strategies or, specific strategies that you have implemented to improve this situation since last year? And and then maybe if you can provide some examples or pilot example that show that you use, your team promoted some innovative or technology to improve construction waste management in New Zealand.
Great question. I think I'll be able to answer most of your questions. First off, with Green Star Buildings, we've said every project has to now do at least 40%. So I think that's going to be forcing everyone, because in the past, sadly, if they can't get to 70% diversion, which is our credit right now, they've kind of said, screw it, I'm not going to even bother dealing with C&D waste for Green Star. Now that every project has to at least do 40%, I think that's going to force every project to be thinking about it more. And we made 40% because that's, like I said, what we think is achievable throughout the country. So I think that's the first thing we've done. We've provided a lot of data to a couple different organizations, including MFE. They're doing some work in this space. Thankfully, the minister from MFE is really interested in this space. So we've provided data from us. Of course, our projects are kind of the best in class because they're actually getting the data and sharing it. We're able to share it. We had to anonymize it, of course. So that's showing, what percentage of a project is, treated lumber and where is it going and what have you. So we can't make project infrastructure occur, but we can at least educate and let the industry know of the problem, which I think a lot of them did. I don't think central government knew about this till probably about 1 or 2 years ago. I think they're now aware of it. MFE has created a website showing where you can actually get rid of C&D waste now. So you can type in on the map and it can show you different places to do this. We are working with Auckland Council on one of their projects to address the hierarchy that we all know we should be doing, right? Diversion from landfill really is the lowest level of this. We need to be first not doing anything, right? Then we want to be minimizing the waste, reducing, reuse, right, recycle. So right now we're just rewarding projects that recycle, and if they reuse, they're not really getting any carrots. So we're trying to work with council to figure out how we can modify our credits to do that and allow even for deconstruction. So we are doing several things. I think for who we are and our size, we're doing a lot. I do think it is incumbent upon councils and central government to work also in the space, identify the issues. I've heard rumbling and rumor that C&D waste facility here in Wellington is closing soon. And if that's the case, obviously we need to figure out something in this region to deal with that. So I would suggest hopefully Greater Wellington Regional Council is aware of that and is dealing with it. And we're happy to work any way we can with that. But I'm very happy to hear that one of the recyclers has finally gotten a weighbridge in. I've been a bit stunned to find out a lot of facilities don't have a weighbridge. I think, as we all know, in the realm of carbon accounting and everything else, if you can't measure it, how can you change or do stuff? So I think that's the first step, is actually making sure everyone has a weighbridge and recording this information, and then we can start changing and lowering percentage going to the landfill.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Sean Kelly, you've been patiently waiting. Did you want to ask a few of your questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Frida. Brad, I think you answered my first two questions and your answer to Jeffy, which were about construction products. But just interested, I used to work at BRE on Bream in the UK, and there was a program of trying to indicate to industry where we wanted to go with the Code for Sustainable Homes. And it was supposed to offer a step change towards building regulations so there would never be a big surprise. And I see this as a really good tool for that. And what happened was the Conservatives came in and chucked that out in their bonfire of policies. And as you see in my comment there, we're not in that political climate really, but I just wondered if there was any work being done, or you guys were speaking to the government about, because what I'm seeing since I've been back is a huge resistance by the construction industry to change. And I agree with you, we really need to see those changes. Are you guys doing any work to because I see this tool as being perfect for trying to do that thing. Say, hey, industry, we've got to change. We're not going to make you do it overnight, but you can actually try it and learn about it, figure out the costs, the suppliers can change and all of that. Is that happening or not?
Well, I'll try and watch my words a little bit. We are doing everything we can to work with this government to move it along to try and make greener buildings. So I don't think I have to say much more than that. I think they're expecting the industry to do all the heavy lifting, which I think that's part of it. But I think we need to be raising the building code, what have you, and we're trying. So all I can say is we're trying. I think it's going to be interesting times ahead, but we've got a reduction in registrations of Green Star right now, but that's just the marketplace right now is what we think. We're pretty confident that once the economy ticks up, we're going to have continued interest, if not more interest, in people wanting to go for Green Star. So, yeah, I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, Sean, but I think it's probably as best I can answer it, honestly.
No, I think it does. You're obviously talking to them, and governments change and times change. So, but yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, it's looking really interesting and really good. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I know that when I did rainwater catchment way back when, I was a bit frustrated that there was no incentive to do it. And by the way, I've since done others. I've read stuff saying life cycles doesn't make sense to do rainwater catchment. So I understand it's a bigger picture, but
A great idea. Thank you. We have got a question, Matthew Nabney.
Matthews? Yeah, I can just, so that what are the primary barriers that prevent organizations? Look, well, there's two, right? One is the unknown. Everyone's fearful of the unknown. And especially subbies and people who don't know what does it mean to be Green Star, right? And sadly, that means people are going to probably put a cost premium on it the first time out. So there is a cost. So no one's going to lie to you on the cost. And also it's growing the marketplace. I think right now we're helping the marketplace grow in the realm of climate adaptation plans and life cycle assessments. To be frank, it's still a little bit of the Wild West out there. We're trying to figure out how we can help standardize it and making sure it's done a certain way. So I think that's what we can help with the industry and to help grow it. But I'm going on a tangent. I don't know. I think if you're council and it's your building, you want a good, durable building and help move the marketplace. So even if there is a cost premium, I would think that it's something you need to be showing that you're walking the talk of what you believe in. And I'm led to believe there's probably at least some people in the higher parts of the organization and or counselors that probably want to see this happen. And yeah, aligning it with your SDGs and the TCFDs and other such things, I think will help be more attractive to the powers that be. Hopefully that answered the question.
Excellent answer. And I did find it really interesting, the massive amount of international, future foresight information that you had in your presentation. We need to be more aware of that. Stephen McNally, did you want to jump in and ask yours?
Oh, thanks, Frida. Thanks for hosting this, by the way. It's very interesting. And Brad, great presentation. We're doing quite a bit of work with urban development now, big residential facilities where the well-being landscape green spaces, there's an expectation that they stay green and lush all year round, so people are starting to irrigate them. I think your code addresses potable water and wastewater quite a bit, but do you have a way of assessing water use efficiency for irrigation?
Yeah, yeah, we got more in the weeds than I wanted to. I think, what is I can't remember the term now. Anyways, it's related to evapotranspiration and watering rates and something like that. So short answer is we have a potable water calculator, and part of that is saying how much are you using for irrigation. And we basically discourage you from using too much irrigation, or if you are, it should only be rainwater. So in our existing rating tool and our new rating tool, you certainly are rewarded for minimizing that. And I would highly discourage well, I guess the short answer is let's just get indigenous plants in there, right? We shouldn't be putting stuff that needs to be watered in the summertime. I mean, just crazy how much. I mean, this is all over the world, not New Zealand, America. I mean, how much energy do we waste creating this English garden that really only works in one part of the world, and yet we seem to try and make it work everywhere. And anyways. I could go on and on. I mean, I used to do rainwater catchment, and everyone wanted to use rainwater in Portland in the summertime where it's completely dry. It's like, well, maybe you do, mulching, indigenous plants, what have you. Don't be putting these highly watered. Yeah. Anyways, I could ramble, but yeah.
Yeah. Very good answer, Brad. Yeah, that's correct. But in the face of it, we still see people irrigating. So we've got a way to go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I used to live in Wellington. I know that there's no water meters, and I think sadly water meters make people behave better. As always, all data makes people behave better. I know in Portland, the Willamette Week, which is this free newspaper, that every year they figure out the worst offenders for wasting water, and they basically do an article on them and just name and shame. I don't know if that's one approach, probably not here in New Zealand, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's possibly Jeffy's question earlier about CapEx barriers or CapEx costs, but I actually think it's whole of life cost and whole of life benefits that need to be thought out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm biased, but I think when you have another third party looking at your project, it just is another layer of quality control. So I think that's just Brad talking, no data to back this up, but I just think if you got someone else looking at, you said you were going to do this, show us the data that you actually did it, show us the documentation, I think you just get a better, higher quality, more durable building. So if I was council, I'd want it for just that alone, right? Because you're going to own that building probably forever, and you want to have a good, durable, quality building.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brad. I'm curious to ask, you talk about, everyone's fearful of the unknown, which is very true. Apparently people would prefer pain than uncertainty, according to psychologists, which is maybe what we're going to get with those heat waves. But I'm curious, given your time in Portland and Auckland or working with these councils in other countries, what do you think the shifts were that got them from where we are now? What are your views on how to normalize these things, or is it just that incremental?
I think as mentioned, when I first moved here in 2014, I was surprised at how little sustainability was talked about. I think the fact that it's becoming common to talk about it is a great first step. But I think making sure that I think what we'll see, what certainly happened when I was in Portland, is a consumer becomes hyper aware of greenwashing. So making sure we're saying, hey, let's see the proof that this XYZ product, building, what have you, is certified, and not just you saying it is, right? So I think we just need to be hyper aware. We need to continue to encourage everyone to be asking for this, but also making sure that there's some third-party way of verifying. I recently stumbled upon the fact in New Zealand, eggs, there's no real good way to verify you've got good eggs. What I do is I look for SPCA, because they're going to only put their name on something I think they believe in, but even that's not scientifically based. So I think we have to have standards, and we need to be educating the industry, say, our people, this is what you should be asking for. In America, I mean, I know about the tall poppy syndrome, but in America, you got LEED buildings, which is, green buildings, and they slap the logo on the outside of the building, and the average Joe on the street knows what a LEED building is. Sadly, we've not done that enough in New Zealand. We've got our nice certificates, but they're usually backed by the reception area or by the lifts or something. And I think we need to be celebrating. I know the tall poppy syndrome, but I think in some ways we need to get over that and say, hey, we're doing good stuff. Look at this. So yeah, we need to be celebrating it. I think what I found in Portland is, being sustainable was kind of sexy. It was kind of there was a cool creed attached to it. And I don't know how we try and make that happen more in New Zealand, so it's attractive to everyone and not just the, doom and gloomers,
That was a great response and some great ideas there. Maybe I'll start guerrilla signposting some GCV logos on buildings. I love that. We're nearly at time. There is a comment, the last question we sort of got in the chat is from Sally. I don't know if you wanted to read that out, Sally. Oh, hey, Sally.
My apologies that you can't see me. There's something wrong with my video and Teams app. So basically, we're sitting in a little house that started in 1898 as a 2 up, 2 down, and we did a lot of big renovations about 11 years ago and put solar panels and double glazing and the whole 9 yards, and thought quite consciously about what we were doing. I would love to know how our house would rate. Is that a thing that you can do? Who could do it, and do you have to pay to get it done?
Great question, Sally. So we've been trying for years to encourage the government to incentivize retrofits of existing homes. Sadly, so far there's been minimal traction. So any way in which you guys, you all at Greater Wellington Regional Council could encourage that, we fully support that any way possible. The short answer is we've got a tool called Home Fit. So you can go to our website, and last I knew, there's a little high-level checklist you can follow. And that's going to really do some basic things, saying what's your water use, what's your energy use, and what have you. So it's admittedly, it's a bit simplistic. If you want to get a bit more detail, you can actually have an auditor come in and review your building and give you some more in-depth information. So that is available. We would love it if you all would incentivize that or encourage that in your realm. Like I said, the best building is a building that's already been built, right? We don't want to be tearing down buildings and putting new ones up. We want to take what we have and make them better. So kudos to you, Sally, for doing that to your building, and that's fantastic. It would be great if we can incentivize that more with, loans. Well, actually, I know several of the banks have. I think ANZ's got a 0% interest for up to $80,000 if you're going to do numerous green things, including, sounds like the stuff you did. So the banks are trying to encourage this out there. It would be great if we had other people encouraging it, councils, central government, what have you. That's my answer to that question. And like I said, it's called Home Fit.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Lowering rates a little bit. Great ideas. We have a great question from Kirsten Hapita. She just says, Kia ora, thanks for all the info shared today. How do the Green Star ratings 456 line up with the Living Building Challenge certification? And do you have a dual certification process?
No, we do not. Look, I first heard about Living Building Challenge when I was in Portland. Fantastic what it does. Short answer is no. We've got a very good relationship, as I mentioned, with Tricia Love and several of the other people who do Living Building Challenges here in New Zealand. We encourage projects to go to Living Building Challenge. To be frank, I would say the building code's here, Green Star's here, Living Building Challenge is up here, right? So it's just another level. We always encourage people to go to the Living Building Challenge, but to be frank, they often come back to us because we're a bit more achievable within the normal realms of what you look at buildings. And just for everyone who knows, the Living Building Challenge basically says anything falling on your building you have to deal with, and you can't have anything leave your building. So that's kind of the ethos of it. I'm simplifying it dramatically, but that's basically it. In my understanding, one of the bigger problems with the Living Building Challenge in New Zealand is how to deal with your sewage on site. Did that answer your question?
So
yes,
we've got it. Thank you. Helen Ju has just thrown into the chat. Has the subject of hempcrete been covered?
No, I know of it. I mean, the short answer is we would be looking at anything that's got lower embodied carbon, right? Which my understanding, hempcrete fulfills that requirement. But I've seen numerous videos on it. I know of it. I think it's cool. I don't know more than what I just said. At the end of the day, we would want to see an environmental products declaration because it's one thing to say it sounds good, but we actually want to see the real numbers to prove that it is. So, and the easiest, not the easiest, but the most standard way of doing it is an environmental product declaration. By the way, on a tangent off that, we are seeing a lot of the suppliers that do just bog standard concrete are offering low carbon concrete now. It's a bit complicated, by the way. I don't want to get into it, but the short answer is the industry is trying. I think it's trying its best to be addressing this. We're always open-minded to alternative products. What I think I know about hempcrete is probably more in the realm of residential, but I could be wrong. But once again, we're open-minded to any type of product as long as it's allowed under our building code, of course. So, because we basically have to do the building code first, then you come talk to us about Green Star, Home Star. We are not, you can't supplement the building code because of us.
Thank you. Now, I just realized we've got about 5 more minutes. I forgot to ask you at the beginning on the promo that went out about this webinar. There was a really interesting photo of you abseiling, and I was going to ask you to please explain that photo. So okay. I'm sure it's building related.
Well, yeah. So we are at 205 Queen Street. Come visit us if you're there. Our interiors fit out was, of course, to Green Star. We walk our talk as best we can. But so in the building, it's a 20-story building, and the Make-A-Wish Foundation used to have an event where they would, as part of a reward of doing that, you could abseil off of it. And because it was they landed at our podium, we did it. Anyways, I'm up there on the top. I've abseiled before, not off a 20-story building, but my coworkers just started abseiling down, and they got me right on the edge. and I'm clipped in and all that, and they go, oh, we rigged you wrong. And by the way, I am literally hanging off 20, stories in the air, and double clicked in with something else, and I'm like, ha ha ha, you're taking the piss. Like, no, really, we got to redo it. I'm like, are you kidding me? So that picture you see, I'm not super comfortable because I just, thankfully got saved, but I still, I upset down
that sounds traumatic.
I upset down pretty quickly. I think I stopped once to kind of go, oh yeah, and then I just went, okay, I want to get down now. So
you just went to the bottom and you found the wellness room and you chilled out.
Just meditate a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Oh
so
my gosh.
That's that picture. So yeah.
That is a good life story.
Yeah.
I'm glad you survived.
Me too. Yeah.
I know that we're approaching time, so I just really wanted to ask you what are sort of 3 to 5 things you just want to leave with people as the key messages of this talk, and maybe some simple actions they can take to kind of get this journey going in their organization or with people they know.
Well, I mean,
it's a tough one. Sorry.
I think we need to start thinking of our buildings as sustainable, not as green, right? So let's expand the scope of what we think our buildings should be doing. And I think most councils and most people who care want the building not just to be good for the planet, but good for the people and the community. So I think that's one of the many great things about this upcoming rating tool. It actually encourages that even more. I think anyway, if you've got any power to incentivize better behavior, look, I'd rather you do Green Star, but even if it's just little things, just some way we can nudge the industry along is a good thing, right? So can you just say you got to do a little bit more for stormwater than what the code says right now? Or if you can't do that, do you give a carrot if they do that? I think that I shouldn't say lazy, but the easy answer is to say do Green Star, do Home Star. But I really encourage trying to figure out any way, shape, or form you can move the dial on this. And we really want it to be not just an Auckland-centric tool. Thankfully, it does happen out there, but it doesn't happen enough out in the regions. We've got one now in Tauranga. We got one in New Plymouth. We've got one in Dunedin. Sadly, we were going to have one in Invercargill, and that looks like it's not going to happen. So it's one thing to get it in Wellington and Christchurch and Auckland, which is awesome, but we need to be educating builders, contractors, subbies to understand why is this valuable, why is this important, why is this a skill you should know, and hey, by the way, using low VOC paint and other stuff that's actually better for you as a subby, right? You're not getting exposed to this nasty stuff. So, showing the value of this and saying, yes, there's a bit of a cost premium, but it's not much. And it's actually in the best interest of all of us to do it. I think that'd be the biggest take-home message I can think of. I think you all are in some position of opportunity to do this, even if it's a little nudge, even if it's just a little push, that's a start, right? So that's my suggestion.
Thank you so much. Those were really wise words, and I think a great message to leave on. And let's all keep in touch on this. Yeah, just a few thank yous from everybody in the chat. That was really valuable. Thank you for your time, and we'll make sure to send everyone out the slides and the recording of this to go back over. I think those slides were amazing. So just a huge thank you. Glad that you survived the abseiling so that you can continue to do this good work. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Ka kite.